All right, everybody. Welcome to our next Rest is Resistance installment. Woo! This has been the ongoing series where we've just been diving into parts of the Rest is Resistance book, which focuses on resisting burnout and grind culture, in order to help us be more resistant to it. And we are talking about the topic of resist today. Woo! Just like every time, we're going to revisit some framings before we dive into it, but we'll be pulling out some quotes and questions and conversations from this section of the book. You all know who I am, so I'm not going to do an introduction because I recognize all of you on the call, but I'm Juanza with MLD team at YUSA. And I always do an introduction based upon the topic. So, for rest and dreaming, we had a chance to talk about. I had a chance to introduce myself based upon that when I was at certain ages and time. But when we're talking about resistance, when we're younger, a lot of times we find ourselves just sort of understanding the world by embracing and embarking into it. I think that's something that we start to notice more when we're teenagers or sort of just like coming up is we start to show up in spaces intentionally, either where we feel comfortable or sometimes where we know we'll stick out a little bit. And so I know that I, as a teen, ran for things in youth and government because there weren't always people who reflected me there. And so I thought that that was my own way of sort of showing up and learning how to disrupt things. And that was something that I learned more about as I got into college and understanding some of the more basic frameworks around that. But then in the workplace, we start to realize that there's some normative culture that we experience, and we have methods and approaches for how we can lean into things that sort of disrupt things that are sort of normative culture. So, employee resource groups or ERGs ended up being a great passageway to exploring resistance a bit in the workplace and building community in order for us to push back on things, to challenge things, and have a collective voice. Obviously, we had our experience in the lockdown when we were all at home and working from home, and a lot of us started to lose some of our, I'd say, like boundaries, or some of our ability to step away from work, and work sort of became this over empowering thing in our home that was always there whenever we turned on our laptop. And so finding ways to step away from home, to turn on boundaries, to set up blockers on my calendar was my way of then pushing back and resisting a little bit in order to challenge some of the boundaries that were lost and to start to reestablish them in the new culture that we were existing in. And from that, I started slowing down more and really focusing in on my opportunity to reflect, to journal, and in so doing, resting, which, as we know from the book, rest is resistance. Resting and pausing and slowing down are their own ways of pushing back against a culture that asks us to be on the move rapidly. So that's my little insight into me as it comes to resistance. But I'd love for, since there's only four of us, I'd love for us to also pause and consider the question, our relationship to resistance, which as we get older and as we switch jobs and move and change, our relationship to resistance changes as well. But we'd love to ask the question, what is your relationship to resistance of grind and burnout culture? What has it been? And who have been some role models for you for resistance? So today we're going to do our welcome, which we've already done, review of our community agreements. We actually aren't going to do a Rust deck poll today, so we're just going to dive into the pieces of it. But in the resist section, we're going to talk about how rest is resistance, explore resisting burnout culture and grind culture, pulling a little bit of insight from one of Trisha Hersey's other book about becoming an escape artist, and then end with a little exercise around habits and practices of resistance. Which is more of a homework challenge for yourself than more learning. Then we'll close that with an invocation, and also just our rest resources for today. So we have these as our community agreements, and we can add some more in where needed, but we uphold our four core values at the Y. We're going to be leaning into active listening into this space, along with asking questions for genuine understanding and not just challenging perspectives. What's shared here stays here, what's learned here leaves here. So we're going to maintain confidentiality, which is why we'll be hitting pause on the record button as we share. We're going to challenge ourselves to lean into some discomfort, contribute to the collective space, and make space for others to contribute. There's only a few of us on today, so I feel like we're good in the space place. And it's always okay to slow down and take your time. And the forever reminder of these is that rest is for yourself, it's not for productivity. So we have this deck. We aren't going to use it today, but it's a great tool and resource where you can pull cards for yourself to reflect on rest in different shapes, forms, and mediums. But today we're going to dive into the reminders of the tenets of the Nap Ministry. So the Nap Ministry is Trisha Hershey's platform for everything rest related. And her tenets for the Nap Ministry are rest as a form of resistance, because if it disrupts and pushes back against burnout and grind culture, because it pushes back against burnout and grind culture, our bodies are a site of liberation. Naps provide a portal to imagine, invent, and heal, and our dream space has been stolen and we want it back. So we will reclaim it via rest. And the book itself breaks itself down into 4 different sections: rest, dream, resist, imagine. If you missed the first 2 calls, we talk about rest and dreaming, but today we're going to talk about resist. And next call, we'll dive into imagine. So as we get into this section, we do want to think about the question of how is rest resistance? And we've shown this before, but this is what rest can look like. And there's a lot of different forms and mediums of it. But I'm going to pull this from the book as just a bit of a reminder that sort of captures these framings really well. So the quote says that rest looks like tapping in and listening to what your body and soul want. It's extra time while bathing, even an extra 10 minutes of concentrated silence. Rest is taking a leisurely walk and dance. Rest is a tea ritual, allowing you to meditate while breathing in each warm up. Rest is not returning an email immediately and maintaining healthy boundaries. Rest is honoring the boundaries of those you engage with. Rejecting urgency. Rest is detoxing from social media. Rest is listening and healing from individual trauma. Rest is journaling so you can be witness to your own inner knowing without the energy of others. Rest uplifts and boosts our spirit, allowing us to know allowing us to know that we are enough and that the care of our souls deserve a role in our healing plans. So as we think about rest in that way, we also have to acknowledge what rest as resistance is not, which is meant to remind us that rest is not a privilege, that we are not resting just to do more. Sometimes we need to reset and rest for work, which is fine, but rest as its purest form is meant to be for you, not for getting back into productivity or burnout culture. Rest isn't meant to be earned. If you're tired, you're tired. Take a break. Take a break and maybe take a nap or go on a walk or do something that sort of allows you to step away from what's exhausting you. Rest is not popular, supported, or modeled in this culture. Rest is also not a state of inactivity or waste of time. Rest is generative, and we cannot wait for the perfect time, space, or opportunity to rest. If we wait, we will be waiting for a very, very long time amidst grind culture. So it's important that we understand that as we explore resistance, we must remind ourselves that we are resting for the reasons we need and not for a luxury or privilege or being seen, or in dealing with the narrative that rest is laziness, which is oftentimes associated with an absent resting as well. So how is rest resistance? We think about some of these things that are meant to disrupt some of the culture that is put into place by grind culture and burnout culture. So there's disrupting our exhaustion. So that's how rest is resistance could show up. So we find ourselves tired day in and day out. Sometimes our body will disrupt our schedule because we get sick. And that's sort of like the thing we don't want to have happen. Instead, we can disrupt our exhaustion by doing things like setting different timings or boundaries for ourselves within the work that we're doing, setting up a day off for ourselves or a week off, finding ways to actually disrupt the things that are exhausting us. It could also be keeping our phone notifications off or keeping our email off of our phone. So that way we don't find ourselves scrolling through emails at the end of the night or first thing in the morning. So there's ways that we are doing things in practice that are exhausting us, and there's ways that we can disrupt that. We also have to listen to our subconscious and to our bodies. They are actually both designed to not exist in burnout culture. So a lot of times we may have an intuition sort of moment in our body of like, should I be doing this? Or our body may get a little achy from a lot of the traveling that we're doing for work, or from our eyes feeling exhausted and heavy from staring at a screen all day. So we need to actually listen to our body because it's telling us something as we are doing these things, and that could be our answer towards steering away from some of our exhaustion. Having a deeper connection with community allows us not to feel too isolated, closed off, and alone, trapped in our work world of grind culture. And as we start to build community, even in space like this, we find ourselves getting reminders of what we should be doing and how we could be disrupting so we're not always getting lost in the isolation of our work world. There's a lot of harmful practices that we continue to push forward, and it's our opportunity to say, I want to begin to address and unlearn and replace some of these. And some of those might be embracing them with some somatic practices. So sometimes we just take a break to eat lunch, which is great, and we should eat because we need to. But sometimes we need to take a breather. Sometimes we need to take an actual nap. Sometimes we need to go outside. Sometimes we just need to do things to help listen to our bodies to really help us feel more centered and connected to ourselves. And then there's always reminders that we can tell ourselves, like mantras or phrases. I have a bunch right in front of my computer screen, so I'm not forgetting to do some of these things, even though I still forget sometimes. But there's ways for us to be able to remind ourselves of some of these things that we could do that are acts of resistance. Oops. For us within burnout and grind culture. And all this kind of ties into this phrase that the book calls soul care. So how are we actually tending to our soul? And as we think about the why, as we think about our mind, body, and soul, um, right? Mind, body, soul, right? Am I saying right?
Spirit.
Yeah.
You got it.
Spirit, soul, they're connected. It's like it's one of the S words. It ties in together, and really our spirit and soul care matter. And it's oftentimes the thing that we don't really have as much practice for within the why. We have faith, which oftentimes shows up in a lot of different ways, which is great. But we also have to take care of our individual soul, which is in harmony and community with others too. So as we think about how some of our pressure or urgency doesn't really tend to our spirit or soul, then you really have to start asking yourself, what could I be doing differently in order to really tend to my spirit and soul a little bit more? And that then begs the question of how we're listening to ourselves. And there's a lot of ways that we speak to ourselves, or may not. If there's a question mark missing on our relief, that should also have a question mark. It's not a statement. These are some of the things that are vessels of communication from ourselves. So sometimes we ask ourselves, what are our dreams telling us? What does my energy level say? What are all the aches and quakes in my body saying? What is my exhaustion telling me? How does my ease show up? How does my joy? What is my joy telling me? How is my anxiety? What is my anxiety trying to tell me? What is my relief trying to tell me? And so the book highlights this framing, which is to turn your attention inward and away from that which is causing trauma, even for a few minutes consistently over time, is liberating rest. Grind culture requires that we ignore anything that is not centered on labor and doing. And as we ignore our body's call to slow down, we disregard the inherent wisdom that is granted to us by being alive. So I'm going to pause there because there's a lot that was shared, and ask the question for you to consider what is resonating with you, especially as it relates to our mind, body, and spirit or soul, and how we listen to it, how we've been ignoring it. And how does the call of burnout culture interact with our call from our soul for care? And then we'll wrap up with our little homework assignment for all of you. So we've talked a little bit about this, but understanding and exploring resisting burnout and grind culture. In order to do that, you have to understand that the foundation for resistance lies in our ability to connect, listen, and repair what has been done to us due to grinding ourselves like a human machine. So our collective rest is a meditation and disruption of violence of burnout, which is from the book. And so we have to ask ourselves some of these questions. If we're exploring resisting burnout and grind culture, what are some of the stories that grind culture continues to tell us? What beliefs have we instilled within ourselves from that culture, in order for us to start finding ways to push back against it? And so the quick examples that I have here are thinking about rest is for productivity, which we've been talking about. So I'm not going to lean into that too much. Thinking about the culture of niceness as a idea that we cannot push back or challenge things. We always have to be nice and compliant, because that's what a good culture is, and that allows us to be complicit to just sustaining the normalcy of grind and burnout culture. Pushing back isn't a bad thing, but the idea of culture of niceness silences our voice. And then the myth of control is the idea that when we're living within grind culture, we are mimicking automated machines, we're human machines, and that doesn't instill any place for change. Change is inevitable. We know that change is all around us, and so burnout and grind culture really aim to control us in that aspect and way. So they don't want us necessarily challenging things or speaking out in a similar way because that then promotes sort of again compliance. And so these are sort of ideas and stories that have been instilled into us by grind and burnout culture that we need to also ask ourselves, how do we address these? And so we don't have to necessarily dive into the stories right now, but it's a question that you will want to ask yourself is what are some of these stories and beliefs that are instilled into me that help make me compliant, I guess, in this culture that we operate in. And so returning back to this, it gives us the reminder of how rest is resistance and that we need to be leaning into soul care. And so we do want to ask you the question of how are ways you have resisted against cultures built to exhaust and deplete us. You've shared a few of them already, so we just want to make space if there are any others that you want to elevate or share here before we talk about other examples of resisting the arrest. So a lot of this is what we've already been talking about. So it's just laying out some things we've already said, but these are just some reminders of what resistance via rest can look like. Dreaming and daydreaming and naps are obviously one we've been talking about, saying no, and maintaining certain boundaries, especially workplace boundaries. And time boundaries are important as well. Taking your breaks, going on PTO, sharing practices with others, as we talked about, and being in community, mantras and reminders and sharing what those are with other people as well. Slowing down is huge. We see harmful practices in play, and so there's ways for us to subvert them, or address them, or see how we can be changing them. And then we can also invent community spaces of care. So ERG, Brave Spaces, this call, there's ways that we can be creating and inventing such that we're not just adhering to the normalcy of things. And then recentering your values and worth outside of work, and really centering them and keying them to yourselves and seeing when things are out of alignment, finding ways to then address that by saying like, hey, this isn't going to work, or and making decisions that are more tied to your value and worth than those tied to your workplace value and work. Pouring into spaces in line with your values too. So if there are things that may fall like a little bit outside of your realm and work, but you want to be a part of it, like inviting yourself in and finding ways to contribute or bringing work to those places. So that way you're able to maybe bring your work values more into alignment with the values that you have. And then reimagining a culture of care and accountability, one that isn't necessarily promoting harm within and trauma within the workplace. There are some quotes that I will not read, but if you get a peek at this PDF, they are built into it. There's a little plug for another book by the same author called Becoming an Escape Artist. And I'm not going to dive too deeply into it, but it talks a bit about the idea that um, in order to resist in a culture of grind and burnout, we have to morph ourselves into a escape artist, and that's a belief. And in order to do that, you have the power to refuse things, and you have to sometimes do it in kind of a way that makes you a bit of a trickster. So you're doing it in kind of a sneaky way that allows you to get around some of the systems that are meant to cause harm. And so these are some poems from the book that talk a bit about, oops, I'm missing some quotation marks, but they talk about I'm the trickster. So some of these examples are I'm the trickster, the one who got away, the one who always knew, the one who was able to transmute grief into rest. I'm the trickster, the one who squinted her eyes, cocked her head, recognized the lies, and keep the scam. I'm the trickster, assigned as the debt collector by my ancestors, resting to reclaim our dream space. I am the trickster. I'm the one who refused, the one leaping from the tops of mountains into the bed of feather pillows. And so it gives the idea that by being a trickster, you are not conforming to the system that we're in, but you're finding ways to disrupt it, to stir up good trouble, and to really begin to craft change by again refusing the power that the system is trying to evoke over you. And so your learning assignment, if you would like to, is to take this same mantra poetic framework and to decide how you want to be a trickster as it relates to becoming an escape artist within the system that we operate in. So your learning assignment is to craft something and maybe share it with someone else on this call, since you all know each other, that say, I'm a trickster, and then complete your own poetic mantra reminder about how you can be a trickster amidst burnout culture. And this book has a number of practices that are infused into it as well. We're not going to have time today to do these practices, but if you want to screenshot this, you can. And it is a practice that just talks about an escape practice that talks about transferring energy and heat into your body and being able to slow yourself down. It's suggested to do this with a partner, so you may want to do this in a place and space that's not your workplace because it will involve you breathing deeply, slowing down, and really having a chance to, connect with yourself, some belly rubbing. Your coworker may walk by and be like, "What are you doing?" So it's a good opportunity for you to screenshot this and to take it as an opportunity for practice later. And the last thing is just a brief reminder about habits and practices of resistance. So imagine a life outside of grind culture right now. We are more powerful than we believe. What liberation can you craft outside of grind culture? Grind culture. What information can you exchange with yourself and others to rest? And are you ready to begin slowly by imagining what it could feel like to have everything you need? Are you curious enough to try rest? And so the idea is that if dreaming is our work and rest is our goal, then resistance is our practice and habits to make space to dream. So we want you to commit and explore practices around resisting. So what practices can you commit to considering or exploring as an act of resistance? And we don't have 2 to 3 minutes, but if you screenshot this, you can explore a few and make the commitment to be a part of a few. So that is the bulk of our call, which is right at noon. Woohoo! And we did rush through that a little bit, so apologies for rushing and not slowing down. These are ongoing resources, which I think I can actually just put into the chat. Oops, started a Teams call by accident. These are all available to you to tap into. This includes resources around the Nap Ministry, resources from Trisha Hersey, Rest is Resistance, the book, along with music from the playlist that was opening up our call. And that's everything. So hopefully this was a nice space to hold time for conversation and for slowing down a bit and exploring what resistance can look like. And we'll continue this with the final space, which is imagine. which will be about how we can be reinventing the normalcy that we exist in and transforming the spaces that we're in and the futures that we want. So thank you.
Thanks as always, everybody. It was great to see y'all and share this space with you.
Thanks, team.